Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Connect, and each and every week we have an episode where we discuss those things relevant to being an owner and operator of a successful accounting, bookkeeping, and tax business. It's here that we're ranging in topics from marketing, selling, offering quality accounting services, onboarding clients, retaining clients, mental health, and so much more. Each and every week I have on the show experts, guests, to share their expertise with us and help us actually understand what it is we can be doing to, in fact, build the premier accounting firm in our area and get paid what we're worth. Now, today is going to be a fun episode. It happens to be Terrell Turner. He is an accountant by trade, but an entrepreneur by passion. He started his career in public accounting, but moved through several corporate finance roles, including being what he calls a ghostwriter for Fortune 500 executives. In April of 2020, he actually started Terrell Turner Group, a firm focused on providing bookkeeping and CFO services to law firms, while also hosting 3 different podcasts, of which he's been very kind to let me be on one of his episodes. So, Terrell, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is going to be a lot of fun. So really where I'd like to begin is just going back and looking at what brought you to the accounting profession. What made you want to become an accountant?
Yeah, so for me, it started off with I really enjoyed business kind of very early on in life. And I was just thinking about like, how could I actually get better at this? And I remember someone telling me like, hey, if you don't understand the language of accounting, then you're not going to do too well in business. And I was like, okay, well, that's where I need to go next.
That is funny. Now, I say funny because you said starting so young, you learned this. How long did how old were you when you started a business and started maybe showing some of those entrepreneurial spirits?
Yeah, so I was 5 years old when I started my first business. And it wasn't because like, hey, I wanted to start a business. It was because like, my during that time, like late 80s, early 90s, my family and I, we lived in Germany because my father was in the military. And so we played outside a lot. And I was playing with one of my friends where we were playing with our toys. And, around a certain time of day, there would be ants that would just come and we just have to stop playing because the ants were there. And um, I went home crying about it. My mom was like, what's wrong? And I explained to her, and she, instead of like just, coddling me, she was like, well, why are the ants showing up? And it was because we were like, my friend's mother was giving us popsicles and we just didn't want to eat them. So the popsicles were melting, which was what was bringing the ants. And I was like, okay, all right, how do you get rid of the ants? Well, we got to get rid of the popsicles. And I was like, well, why don't we just sell them to other kids in the neighborhood? And so that's what started my first business, just selling those popsicles. So his mom would make them and then we would go sell them before we could play with our toys. So we wouldn't have the issue with ants. And that was like my first business that I started.
At age 5, I have to commend you. That is impressive. And the ingenuity there, I hope you made a few dollars as you were selling popsicles.
Yeah, we made a few dollars. I mean, it was a great time. I'll sell my candy or sell the popsicles, put the money under my mattress, and I had a decent amount of money, and the business went well until we got new competition because eventually the ice cream truck added our neighborhood to their route, and I just couldn't compete anymore. I mean,
Nope.
they had a bigger access to inventory than I did.
I think that's amazing. All right. So starting as young as you did, you obviously were advised accounting is the language of business. What other lessons did you learn at that age that you feel have helped you as you've gotten older? I mean, going as an entrepreneur at such a young age, you've got to learn a few things that might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is that, great businesses start with a problem that you are solving. Because for me, it was, I wanted to get rid of the ants, and that's what started it off. So for me, it just started this thought process of if there is a problem, there could be a business here. You just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that became like probably my biggest lesson that still continues to inform me as I'm thinking about now my accounting firm and just how I navigate things is if there's a problem, that means there could be a business there. And then I think the other thing is really getting the word out about what you're doing is so, so important. I mean, one of the I would say the painful lessons it taught me is like when the ice cream truck came, is I was like, man,
Mm-hmm.
they have theme music. I don't. Like that's part of the reason why they're winning.
At least you're paying attention to your competition. I like it. Now, your point of pain, that there's got to be something there that the customer is wanting to resolve or relieve. I think that's an excellent point for business. I think so often when I'm meeting with my clients, I'm asking them, so what is it that you are resolving or doing for your customers? I would add to that that sometimes instead of pain, it's opportunity. What is it that you're selling that you're helping somebody achieve that they wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve? Meaning they may not actually have a pain, but there is definitely an opportunity, an ROI perhaps, that they can take advantage of. So those two questions I think are pivotal to starting and running a business, to always have front and center. The other thing I wanted to bring up is I know that you had this ghostwriter experience. And for many of the listeners, I presume they may not know what ghostwriting is. Explain to me what that is and how you actually became involved in that for Fortune 500 executives. I think this is fascinating just because I'm familiar with the industry.
Yeah, so for me, it's like, after college, I went into public accounting, did auditing for a while, didn't really like that. And so I moved over into industry and just did several corporate finance roles. And one of the roles that I ended up landing in was investor relations. And, by that point, I guess, I had developed a decent level of communication skills when it came down to finance and accounting content. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the projects I was given is like, hey, here are some of the questions that the Wall Street analysts are asking our executives. How would you answer this? And so I just sat down and I started writing out answers. And the VP of Investor Relations was like, this is really good. And the CEO read it and he was like, I can actually explain this, because I was explaining something about revenue recognition. And he was like,
Okay.
this makes sense to me. And so then it just became when the executives were going on like their road shows or talking to the major banks or talking to Wall Street analysts, they would come to me and say, hey, how should I answer these questions? Or, hey, what should we recommend that this is how the COO should answer it? This is how the CEO should answer it. And during that time, like the different executives they were asking my input. How do we word this answer? And so
Mm-hmm.
part of my job became not only just doing finance and accounting, but also how do I write the response that they're going to give? So it became interesting of whenever they would get on an earnings call is I would hear verbatim, I wrote that.
That is so impressive. Communication is such a key part of business, and to be a great communicator is unique. It's something that few people have as a skill. It's definitely something you can develop, but for people to see that in you and lean on you for your ability to simplify terms, explanations, that's huge. I love it. I think that's just amazing. So well done on your part. Let's go to you starting your business, because obviously this is for accounting professionals. So many individuals like you go that corporate route, they get the job. But in April of 2020, you actually chose to start your own accounting business. What caused you to want to leave the corporate ladder? What caused you to go out on your own? Tell me about that decision.
Yeah, so I would say early on in my career, I think my public accounting experience taught me that I don't want to work in corporate forever. And so a lot of what transpired afterwards was me being strategic, and some of it was a little bit of luck of landing in the right role at the right time, but trying to be strategic about the jobs that I was doing that would prepare me for when I did decide to leave to start my own business. And so for me, it was kind of like I imagine an analogy like, I was creating some type of special meal. And as I'm walking through the grocery store, you're picking up the ingredients that you need. And that's how I
Hmm.
thought about the different jobs that I was taking is this is going to give me experience with FP&A. This is going to give me experience with communication. This is going to give me more exposure to sales. And it was almost like I was just picking up the ingredients that I would need because I said, one day I'm going to leave the corporate world and start my own. And I think what really sparked it was the last corporate role that I had. I was, the director of FP&A for a tech company, and we raised about $85 million in private equity funding. We had bought two other companies, and it was just, 70 to 90 hour work weeks for about a year. And I was like, if I'm
Hmm.
going to work this hard, I want to own the business. So I was like, now is the time. And so my wife and I talked about it, and she was like, yeah, it would be nice to not see you work as much, and not own the business. So I was like, you know what, let's just do it. Now, at the time, it was December of 2019 when we made that decision. And
Okay.
because of my position, the CFO and the CEO asked me to stay on a little longer to help wrap up a few projects. What I didn't realize is by the time we wrap those projects up, it would be April of 2020, in like the middle of like pandemic shutdown orders, to where it's
Yep.
like,
Yep.
wow, interesting time to start a business, Terrell.
Well, you experienced something at that time of year that I can't say many have ever experienced. It was such a unique period of time in our lives. But you had some unique things coming into play that really demanded the attentions of accounting professionals. You had the PPP loans that were going out. Individuals needed to show as a business that they qualified for those. There was a lot of demand, I feel, from the business world, from the accounting profession, as to whether or not to stay in business, whether or not to keep employees, where to cut costs, whether or not to double down in the marketing and sales and grow the business during the pandemic. So many things going on that really could use the accounting professionals. Did you find that business owners were leaning on you and were drawn to you?
I did find that, I think early on with the PPP loans, I think a lot of business owners that I was coming across, they didn't grasp why like they needed the financials. It wasn't until some of them started getting denied
Oh,
and some of them were trying to go for loans, then they start realizing like, oh, maybe a bookkeeper or accountant is something that I need. And so for me, it was really, I'll say, a helpful opportunity for me to
mhm.
understand like what is the perception of accountants in the minds of the people who actually need our services. And so once I started seeing that, and I'm like, okay, all right, let me tweak my messaging to align with the pain that they're feeling or the problem that is right in front of their face. That's where
Mhm.
we started to see a little bit more traction, because I think beforehand my messaging as a accounting firm wasn't aligned to the problem that they were experiencing.
I love this because obviously that goes right to marketing and it's communication, which I think you're well spoken and you're obviously spot on with your ability to kind of articulate that messaging. But once you know what you're saying and to whom, it starts to resonate and you can get the clients you need. So this brings me to the idea of niching. At what point did you choose to niche into the law firm space?
Yeah, so that one, to be completely honest, it was a lot of trial and error to getting to that point, and we probably reached that point maybe about a year and a half, between a year and a half to maybe I'd say about 20 months in, is
Okay.
when I really got very comfortable, because it was very uncomfortable to decide like, hey, we're going to put a flag in the ground and say this is who we work with, because the first thought was, well, what about all the other potential business? Are they going to like
Mhm.
run away? And so it took us some time to get to that point.
So how did you choose it? Why law firms?
Yeah, so I mean, we started off working with, pretty much just like just like many accounting firms, whoever was willing to pay us, that's who we were going to work with.
Uh-huh.
Um, we did that for a while and it started realizing like, wow, this is kind of a painful process to jump between this industry to this industry. I mean, yes, there are some things generally in common because they're all businesses, but some of the specifics and us being able to deliver the most value, I'm like, we probably need to like get a little bit clearer. And I think for me is I leverage back on like my days of working for industrial manufacturing companies when I would work with the Six Sigma team and even just being on the production floor. I'm like, well, that person's job is to do one specific thing. They're not jumping between this type of product, that type of product. And I'm like, if we can create that in our accounting firm, that will be better. And so I started, I'd done some consulting with different types of companies, and I had done consulting with about 17 different law firms. And I really took a step back and said, we understand their processes. their business structure is very similar to an accounting firm. So I'm like, we understand that. We understand the problems they have. And law firms are probably in need consistently, like whether there's a good economy, bad economy. So I'm like, they will be good paying customers. And because they're used to billing their work or their expertise out to their clients, they're used to me submitting a proposal for them to pay us to do outsourcing work, to where I'm like, this just makes so much sense. Like, they can pay the bill. We understand their industry. They have a need for us. I'm like, those three things really made it like, this is the perfect niche to focus on.
I love this. This is so good. Your evolution from starting the business, taking on clients, and after a year and a half, finding that maybe there's a chance for you to niche, I think is a very common experience. A lot of the people that I work with, they do begin just taking on the clients that they can acquire. They need to pay the bills. And after a period of time, and I think it's inevitable, they're going to hear, be told, advised, you should be niching your services. And so they're going to consider, well, if that's an option, maybe I should do this. And then it just becomes this evaluation of, what clientele am I working with? What do I enjoy working with? What do I find the best experience with, margin with? Who do I have the most to offer? All these things lead to this path of, all of a sudden, start messaging that you are niching in a particular industry and you offer a unique service to them. You raise your rates accordingly, and off you go. So what advice would you have for someone that is considering niching? You kind of hit on a few things, but is there anything more you'd want to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things I want to say, but I guess before I jump to that, I'm curious on your thought, Roger. Like, what have you seen? Like, how long is it on average have you seen people go before they decide to niche?
Oh, on an average, probably a year and a half, like you experienced. I have seen people try to start right out the gate who are just specifically trying to target a specific audience in their marketing and in their client onboarding. I don't typically advise that, only because I think it's better to get a foundation of paying customers, and also see, are there other industries you want to do in. The second thing I'd say is, the niching idea, even if it's 5 years down the line, I think it's great to refine your messaging, your marketing, what you're trying to do for certain industries. But I do feel that there's also a misnomer about niching. Niching isn't meant to say you don't take certain clients. Niching isn't to say you no longer work with specific clients. It just says that your marketing, your messaging, and your unique selling proposition resonates with a specific industry. And so I know firms that choose to do one, two, or three niches, where they work with one or two, three different industries deliberately. They have the expertise on staff, and more importantly, they're trying to diversify themselves, like you were alluding to, so that if the industry, the economy takes a hit, they as a firm aren't so adversely affected, simply because they've got one or two other niches that they're specializing in. And so, and I'll actually point this out as, imagine you're niching with dentists, but you also focus on orthodontists or oral surgeons or people that do, let's say, wisdom teeth extraction. They're all in that same space, but your messaging can be really specific to each of them. And by definition, you have now four niches that you're targeting, and you could have a unique clientele in each. So that's kind of my thoughts regarding niching, I guess.
Awesome, awesome. And I agree with a whole lot of that, because that's kind of the experience that I ended up living through. And I think, to your original question about kind of what other advice or feedback, and I think
Hmm.
for a lot of times when we're thinking about a niche, and I even thought about, went through this myself, is at first I thought we wanted to focus on restaurants, and
Yeah.
which was great, because during that time there was a lot of funding and grants being given to restaurants, so they had
Yeah.
influx. But then when I started really thinking about like the business model, the ebbs and flows, and then when their cash flow started getting tight, and then it's just like, hey, they need to decide whether they're going to make payroll or whether they're going to pay their bookkeeper that month. And I was just like,
Hmm.
okay, all right, this is probably not the only industry I want to hitch my wagon to. Um,
Exactly.
and so I totally agree with you, I think, on the diversification. And I think, for an accountant, if you're, looking at your firm, if really asking yourself, like, are you overexposed to the risk of a specific industry? And I think what that requires is you have to get a better understanding of that industry. And like for us is we got a better understanding of restaurants. Like we still do have some restaurant clients. And then we got a better feel for other like service oriented type businesses. We have some of those, but when it comes down to a lot of our messaging and
Yep.
the ads that we're putting out, we are targeting law firms. And one of the interesting things that I found is that even when we decided to really, lean heavier into that, we would have other businesses that would come to us and say, hey, I really liked what you guys are saying in your content that you're creating, your podcast, or I heard you speak. I know you only work with lawyers, but would you consider looking at our business? And in that point, I'm like, man, this put us in a very unique position because now we are seen as even more valuable than when we were trying to market to everybody.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. And I do feel that with niching, it gives you a chance to kind of offer additional services that you wouldn't be able to perhaps offer to any of your general clients. It's just simply because you can create some packaging, some unique services that address the particular needs of the law firms in your case that obviously don't work or apply to any other industry. And so you start getting into these unique situations. You find out what really exists for the owners of these firms, and all of a sudden you start talking their language, offering services that meet their needs. I think it's a lot of fun, in my opinion, just to become that expert. And then at the same time, you really start to see how you make a difference in each of their businesses, their lives as owners. And it's more than just doing the compliance work or the tax work. So I think there's a lot of passion that can come into the place when you start to niche. So that's quite fascinating in my book. Let's talk about something that I know you experienced, and I believe you have some insights on, and it's these conversations that you have with potential clients where they're considering hiring in-house staff versus outsourcing it, obviously, to you. How do you have a conversation with someone that's evaluating that? What do you help them realize as they're considering in-house staff versus outsourcing?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great question because, it's something that I've experienced more as we got a little bit better about understanding the value we deliver, which meant our pricing went up. And I've even had other accounting firms in different parts of the country reach out to me as we're connecting. And this is one of those questions like, as you understand your value, your pricing goes up, companies will start to, debate this of, do we bring this in-house or do we hire your outsourcing firm? And when I'm talking to a potential client, a couple of things that I'm trying to understand is, what are their requirements? Because I think a lot of times, when people say that they want to bring it in-house, it's because they're like, well, we want this person to be on call. So where if we have something come up, and then when you have an honest conversation with them, like, how often does that actually happen? And you start to ask a couple questions and you ask them like, well, how often do you talk to your accountant now? And what I end up finding is that sometimes it's just because they've had a bad experience with an outsourced accountant because
Mhm.
that accountant didn't set the expectations properly on how often they should communicate. So they just felt like something was missing. And so I think as we can kind of get to that and say, hey, if you're going with someone in-house, hey, here's what I would recommend if you're needing this person's attention, let's say, you know, 3 to 4 times a week, and it is on projects that require, let's say, 3 to 4 hours of attention, then maybe, yeah, having someone in-house would be a good fit. And when I start to explain it that way, they're like, well, we really don't need them that much. And I'm like, well, if you don't need them 3 to 4 times a week, you're going to pay them for 5 days a week of work and you only need them for two. And then they're like, yeah, you know what? That's probably not a good idea. And, and then I tell them that, you know, it is perfectly okay for you to set the expectations, even if you hire an outsourced, bookkeeper or accountant, whether it's our firm or some other firm. Like, let your expectations be known. And it has been surprising to me as I talk to so many different business owners, like how many of them did not realize that, hey, you can let your expectations be known. Like, you don't just have to accept what the accountant gives you. If you
Mhm.
have different requirements, let them know, because you're paying them. They are here to serve you and your needs. And I think as we start to talk through it that way, what I start realizing is a lot of firms and different clients, they tend to get a lot more comfortable. Like, okay, I do feel like I'm going to be able to get what I need from your firm because, hey, I can let you know what I need. And I'm like, you can always email us and reach out to us. And every client that I've said that to, they may reach out to me maybe 3 times a month. And I'm just like, you were going to pay someone full time when you've only reached out to me 3 times a month. Now, part of
Hmm.
that also is we also set up a cadence of telling them, like, hey, here's what the reporting cadence is going to be. So it's going to be in your inbox before you even have to reach out. And we like to customize a lot of like the reporting. We use, we end up using Google Sheets a lot because a lot of
Hmm.
clients like that. And so we can build in, some of the analysis or some of the questions that you're going to ask. We'll just build it into the template. So when you go in there, that's one less question you have to reach out to us for. And I think a lot of clients tend to feel a lot less anxious about hiring in house. And then there are some that I tell them, hey, if your requirements are going to be, let's say, 3 to 4 days a week, you need somebody hands on, like, not only will I recommend you hire someone, here's 5 questions you should ask in the interview to help you pick the right person.
I love that. You've hit on a number of things that I'm quite passionate about, and I'd like to address a few of them real quickly because you did a great job bringing them up. The first is I feel that the accounting profession, we have done ourselves a huge disservice when providing outsourced services in the sense that I don't feel that the clients truly benefit or see the value in what we're doing. And so as a firm is trying to offer their services, the client considers their past experiences and they're like, I just don't see the worth of this. I don't see the value of it because their past experiences have not been favorable. And the same is true for the employee that's in the company. They don't speak unless spoken to. They don't bring information to light when necessary. And I think we need to be so much more proactive as a profession in providing the information so that business leaders, business owners see the need for this to make more informed, educated business decisions. Okay. The second thing is your last point of the questions that they should be asking in an interview. If they chose to bring someone in-house, I do feel that a lot of owners, business leaders, they struggle to understand how to actually identify or qualify the appropriate candidate for an in-house position. They're filling a position, but they don't know how to manage it. They don't know how to screen or qualify people for it. They don't know how to actually help that person excel in that position. And so it is, in my opinion, oftentimes better to outsource it. What is it they want? Pay for that service. You don't have to then deal with the internal drama of a new employee, giving them the new computer they need or software access. Just outsource it. What do you expect? And by outsourcing it, the beauty of it is we then have is the opportunity to really deliver, shine, like you were pointing out. What are those questions that they expect to have answered each and every month or quarter? And we just intuitively give that information to them right where they expect to see it so that they can get what they're looking for to make the decisions they want. Outsourcing, I really do believe in it. I think it has a lot of potential to excel. I'm writing a book coincidentally right now about your strategic accountant, and it's basically meant to empower the accounting profession to really step it up for the business community. And we, as a profession, give them the information they need to really excel. They're the backbone of our economy, and we need to be more proactive in helping them excel. So, any final thoughts on outsourcing versus in house?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, what I've realized is it is a great, even revenue opportunity for accounting firms, even if a client does decide to hire someone in-house. And one of the things that I've said to some people is that, depending on what their needs were, like for some of the clients, they wanted an accountant because, or they wanted a bookkeeper in-house because they wanted to do billing more frequently. And so one of
Okay.
the things that I said was like, how about this? We'll still do the bookkeeping. You can hire a biller.
Mhm.
And when you hire the biller, we'll train them how to do the billing process. Because we already know the process, we can train them so you don't have to be the one to train them. And then there can be a consulting fee that we are paid to train their biller, and we are still doing the bookkeeping. And then also, if they want to hire a in-house accountant, and I think you hit on it very well, is a lot of times they have no idea how to supervise or manage a accountant that they hire in-house. And it's just like, to get a person that you are going to hire that is going to be self-sufficient, that price tag is going to be probably much higher than what they're expecting to pay. And so one of the things that we say is that if it is the right fit for you to hire in-house, here are the 5 questions you should be asking. And when you hire them, we're willing to train that person how to do their job. We'll do a 1 week training session with them where we'll hop on calls, and we'll do, let's say, 2 to 3 hours. We'll hop on calls with them, help them get up to speed. That way, you can get a person in house and you don't have to be the one to train them. And it becomes a revenue opportunity for us to be paid to train their staff. And whenever they need special projects or CFO projects that are beyond that person's skill set, we're the first people they call.
Exactly. I love that, because what you're doing is you're showing that you're a key part of their success, and you're really extending this opportunity for them to have you train this individual that's doing the day-to-day operations, but yet still utilize your services to do month end, quarterly, year end, get things ready for compliance and taxes. I mean, there's just a lot of symbiotic relationship that the business owner could appreciate, simply because you're not putting them in a lurch. You're letting them actually hire somebody in-house to take care of those day-to-day type things while you're kind of training and overseeing them. I like that, and that's something that I've seen actually a number of times, just because there are businesses that are large enough to have enough transactions going on, or enough payroll and so forth, that would benefit having somebody in-house. That's why they do exist as positions in-house, but you're at least still involved and engaged with them as a client. So I like that. Let me ask another question about your staff. The thing that I think a lot of firms struggle with is, you find good quality employees, good loyal individuals. How do you go about helping them grow with the business, and using your staff to keep the skills and engaged with you as you would hope they would be?
Yeah, so something that we've done kind of loosely, and actually 3 days ago, I was sitting down and going through this. I was like, just like we sit down and we look at what are our goals and objectives as a business for the month. Like, I'm pretty involved on the sales side of the business. So we're steadily looking at those objectives. And I'm like, when we are disciplined about looking at those and developing a strategy, we tend to see a lot more progress. And I was like, why aren't we doing the same thing with the staff, of really sitting down and saying, like, hey, what is the current skill set of that staff member? And once a year, I mean, I'm having conversations with them, asking them, like, hey, what other types of things would you like to learn, or what other types of experience? And then in my mind as a leader, I'm sitting back and I'm like, okay, if I were to draw a map for them to go from where they are today to developing that skill set, and how it overlaps with the business's objectives, what can I do to help? And then each month, like, I may identify 1 or 2 projects that I'm like, you know what, I can pull them in on this project. Or, hey, I can give them a little more responsibility, take some stuff off my plate to help them start developing that skill as they're working towards it. And, we use quite a bit of outsourced staff. So we have staff that are offshore in the Philippines. And, one of the things that I was telling myself was like, you know what, it would free up my time a lot more if, the staff was a little bit more comfortable communicating directly with the client at times. And I was saying this to myself. And then 2 days later, I started CCing, my senior accountant in the Philippines on emails that I was sending to clients.
Mhm.
And 2 days later, she sent me a message and she said, hey, this is something I want to get good at. I was like, oh, perfect. So I think we're finding gaps and then trying to figure out what are ways that we can help them close those skill gaps.
Mhm.
And then also letting them know that, hey, if there is something you want to learn, let me know. And we'll work on trying to strategize to get you that skill set.
I think when an employee feels that they are being invested into, that the loyalty, the work ethic that they've demonstrated has proven itself worthwhile, that you're willing to invest in them, that says a lot. And the employee, I think, does appreciate it. The thing that I use in our firm is we look at tools, training, temperament. It's part of a business culture philosophy that we implement here based on what we call the STAR program. And tools, training, temperament basically says, do they have the tools to do their job, the resources that they need to be productive? Do they have the training with the tools that we've given them? Because oftentimes we might bring into the business something new, a new platform or new system. Well, are we training them to be efficient on that tool? And then temperament. Are they happy? Do they feel like they're supported, that they are making a difference in the business, that they're valued? Are there outside things that are impacting their life? Is there drama that's being brought in that's affecting their temperament? And if we can look at tools, training, and temperament, we can typically find when a person's not doing their job, which of those is out of whack that we can address and help them resolve. So for us, tools, training, temperament is kind of our mantra. You brought up outsourcing, and I'm so excited for this. A lot of firms really are uncomfortable or are not, let's say, able to decide how to best outsource their services overseas. You've made that transition. I likewise work with virtual VAs and so forth. I have employees that are outside of the United States. There's a stigma sometimes that goes on that, working with all domestic type employees. Do you have any thoughts as to how you came to that conclusion of wanting to outsource it, especially in today's unemployment situation, struggling to find good employees, but also just the idea of logistically how to do that? And how did you find the firm that you are using?
Yeah, so I mean, it's something that I go back to my corporate experience of, when I worked for, General Electric during the time years ago. One of my projects is to help build up the team we were using in India, the remote accounting team. And
Okay.
one of the things that I spent a lot of time with some of the other executives and some of the different business units is going through our responsibilities. What were we spending our time on? What could actually go remote versus what needed to stay local? And I think once we started going through that exercise, people were shocked that only 30% of what we were doing needed to stay local. And I'm like, so that's 70% of what we're doing that is consistent, repeatable. We can develop processes, and those type of things weren't really time bound. And so I took that mindset when I was, building up my firm and really thinking about it. I'm like, with that mindset, plus the obvious one is that I'm asking our clients to get comfortable about outsourcing their work to me. Why should I not be
Yes.
comfortable outsourcing work to another team? Like, if I can develop processes that get my clients comfortable, why can't I just develop processes within my own company and get myself and the rest of the team comfortable? And when we started looking at that, one of the things that we realized is that there were some opportunities that we didn't realize were going to, come to light. And I think part of it was like, part of our team, they're in the Philippines. We're using a company called Tor Global. They've been great about, finding different talent in the Philippines, and it's really forced us to get very disciplined about our processes and our procedures and
Yes.
making it very clear, because that is one of the weakest areas that that from talking to other accounting firms, I feel like, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, but I've noticed that accounting firms are very weak when it comes to creating clear processes. And for us, when we created those processes, it started making the process a lot easier, to where some of those things that I've heard people identify as a skill gap of outsourced team or a skill gap that offshore teams have. And I'm like, that's not as much of a skill gap as it is a process gap. And so
Hmm.
once we started filling those holes of the process gaps, we started seeing the quality of the output of our outsourcing team started improving, to where I'm like, okay, we have to do some introspection and realize some of that problem was us and not them. And I think going back to what you were saying is providing them with the insight, the tools, and also the opportunity to ask questions. And
Mm.
when we created that environment, it really, really improved our outsourcing processes. Now the clients are happy. We're happy because we can get more work done working this dynamic. But I'm curious what your view has been when you're looking at other accounting firms. How are they about processes?
Yeah, so I think you just nailed it on the head. It's the processes, and I'm going to actually add to why. A lot of times I think when valuing a firm, one person would want to consider then the client list. And there's definitely worth in the client list. That is a great way of assessing the value of a business. But even more so, after I've talked to numerous people that have purchased accounting firms, the greater value actually comes in the processes and procedures that the firm has to take care of the clients that they're serving. And those SOPs really determine whether or not they're going to retain the staff as they acquire the firm, whether or not they're going to retain the clients and providing quality services to them. And so your point is exactly right. The accounting firm, the better they can actually implement policies and procedures and then are able to duplicate those, delegate those, that's going to determine their success. So those three things that I just mentioned that I'm going to draw attention to are you've got to document, you've got to figure out what are the processes, you've got to be able to then duplicate them, assign them, give them to someone else, teach them, and have them understand what's expected, and then be able to delegate the responsibility and authority for those roles. If you can document, delegate, and duplicate, then all of a sudden you're in a position where your firm can grow and really become a lot more profitable because of the consistency of the workflow that's going on. Now, as to your comment, if you're asking your clients to outsource, why are you so anti-outsourcing yourself? And I think that is perfect. That's the epitome of what we're talking about here. You're asking everyone to outsource to you. Why, if you are struggling in the current economy with unemployment being so low, not being able to find qualified people, are you so unwilling to outsource yourself? And in our company, we've gone through a process. This is over the last few years where I was very much of the opinion, I'm old school enough that I wanted to have the employees such that I could build a culture. I could have them in the office. I could interact with them throughout the day. And because of COVID and some other things preceding COVID, we moved ourselves into a remote work environment. Prior to COVID, I actually had only 3 people within the company coming into the office, myself included. Everyone else working from home. They preferred it. So when COVID came, it wasn't a big transition for us because everyone was already remote. But now that COVID's over, I think it's not just our own company. I think the economy, the employee expects a lot of the flexibility afforded them to work from home. And so we now have transitioned to the majority of my employees no longer work in my state. They're all throughout the state. And likewise, we've gone to outsourcing to where I have an assistant that's in Kenya. I have some that are in the Philippines. I've got people outside of the United States, and working with them has been phenomenal. I can definitely tell you that they have an eagerness to be employed within a United States company, working with a United States business leader. They want to hold on to these jobs. They love what they're doing. And honestly, they're very skilled, they're capable. So as long as you're willing to work with these people, I think they're more than happy to perform and do so effectively. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And one thing I'll add to that is, which became a new benefit we realized when we started, is our team in the Philippines. They work their daytime, which is like 11, 12 hour time difference. And it
Hmm.
actually became a phenomenal asset for us because, I may be up, let's say, from 6 until 8. I'll have a meeting with the team if there's some stuff we need to address, maybe 2 times a week. And they have their marching orders. They know what they need to do. Processes are laid out. But the good thing is that they're working in the evening. So when I wake up in the morning, the work is done. So when I want to start
Hmm.
meeting with clients, I can actually start taking client meetings first thing in the morning because the work is done. And before, what the issue we were running into is, well, if all the work was being done in my time zone, like, I'm either getting stopped, asked questions, or let's say the client wants to meet and like, well, can we meet later in the day? And the client's like, well, I prefer in the morning. Well, I'm like, you know what? This actually helps solve that. And we didn't realize it was going to help solve that, but it is just another unique opportunity of offshoring of, like I said, the people can produce quality work. It's forced us to get better about our processes. I mean, it's improved and fixed a timing issue of the work and meeting with clients.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I mean, it's been amazingly cost effective to do it. And so, I mean, I think that there are just so many great reasons that when I'm talking to other accounting firms that are on the fence about it, I'm just like, I think you should probably get off the fence about it because there's too many victories that you can win for your company. And it also takes off some of that pressure from your US only team, and it allows them to start doing other things that add even more value to the firm and to the client and to their own lives.
Yep. It's affordable, the workforce that's there for the skills that they provide. And as to the firms that I speak with where they say they are turning away clients, cannot take on clients, they're working too many hours, I think this is a solution that they should consider. And it's a viable one that I've seen success with. So this is wonderful. Well, Terrell, this is what I'd like to do. I'm going to wrap up a lot of what we've been discussing here. I'm going to come back to you for a closing thought. But before I do this, I do want to point out to our listeners that in the episode description, Terrell has been very kind to provide a way to take advantage of his newsletter called Profit Secrets. It's basically lessons learned from big business strategies, and he breaks them down to practical action-based items that you can actually apply as a small business owner. It's CFO insights for small businesses that can't afford to hire a CFO. So if you'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to subscribe to that newsletter and get these nuggets of information, definitely go to the episode description and you'll find there the information you need to do so. In addition to that, one of the things that I want to share is also information on how you can become a profit and growth expert. I really do feel that as you choose to work on your business, you need to be looking at what those things are you could be offering your clients, particularly as you're getting into the phases of niching and so forth. So take a moment and find out more about what it is you can do to become a strategic accountant for your clients, a profit and growth expert. So take a moment and go to the episode description for that information. As a summary of our conversation, this has been just wonderful. Terrell is amazing. I love his youth experience. I think that entrepreneurial spirit that he found as early as age 5, dealing with the popsicles, was amazing. I think obviously, like every business owner, it's finding the problem and then identifying the solution and then taking that to market. And I think that's a wonderful thing that he did. I believe in his career, he was clearly identified as someone that could communicate well. He's definitely well spoken. And in doing so, he was able to actually help these CFO level individuals communicate more effectively to outside investors, to the bankers, to the employees, various principles that they need to understand about the workflow, about the business. And he did so in a very effective way. His starting his business, his story, I think is very, very akin to so many people's experiences, where he actually got to the point where realizing I work so many business or so many hours for the business, why not do the same thing for my own company? And he took that leap of faith. He coincidentally did it when the economy was in upheaval, obviously in association with the pandemic, but still nonetheless with perseverance, it paid off. After a year and a half doing so, he obviously found himself in a position where he was needing to niche. And I think that topic was an amazing discussion simply because so many of us have that conversation considering whether or not to niche, and just the insights that Terrell was able to offer as he shared his evolution to niching and why he did that, how he did that, and how we also can kind of assess whether or not it is the right thing for our own firms and how to go about that process. So niching was a great discussion. The other that was helpful was this whole idea of outsourcing. First of all, working with a client who's considering hiring in-house or using us as their service. I think that was a very good discussion of how we can actually help the business owner, especially if they do choose to bring somebody in-house and still be a part of that relationship. But likewise, we, as accounting professionals, need to consider the ability to outsource, particularly when we're struggling as much as we are to find quality employees. It is a viable solution. It is where we can find quality individuals with capable hands to literally come in and do the work affordably, and in turn allow us to grow our businesses, take and provide quality services to our clientele, and most importantly, build a business that we can be proud of, obviously building the premier accounting firm in our area. So love the conversation. Great insights as to what we can be doing to run our businesses and do so effectively. Terrell, what final thoughts would you have for the audience?
Yeah, I would say for accounting firms, it is an amazing journey to be on. I mean, it's a great opportunity. We deliver a lot of value. One of the key things about delivering that value is finding the right messaging for the audience you want to reach. And when you find the right messaging of how you communicate your value to that specific audience that you're targeting, I mean, your growth will take on its own speed, and you will be surprised at how fast you grow because what we do is valuable. We just got to fix the messaging and make sure we connect with the right audience.
That is beautiful. Terrell, thank you so much. For additional information about GrowCon, our annual event for business owners as to where they can come and attend and participate, basically meeting your peers and hearing from the experts, check out more about GrowCon in the episode description. The event is an annual event for business owners that we do to actually help you become the premier accounting firm in your area. Also, check out the additional free resources in the episode description. We have free resources to help you actually address those things in your business that you need to be working on so that you can be the leader you need to be, and more importantly, offer the quality accounting services you need to. Definitely, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. We have a number of things released each and every week that you'll want to take advantage of. You can, as you subscribe, set the notifications so you can get the reminders. And in doing so, I would also suggest you go back and listen to our past episodes. We've had some amazing conversations with wonderful individuals on topics that I'm sure you'll find very helpful and important for your business. So subscribe, check out the past episodes, do a little bit of binge listening, and you'll definitely enjoy it. And lastly, if you'd like to apply these principles in your business, feel free to reach out to us here at Universal Accounting. You can do so by giving us a phone call at 801-265-3777, or you can visit us online at universalaccountingschool.com. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal. Take care, have a great day, and be safe out there.